The smell of something wonderful drifts from the church kitchen, but it's not what you'd expect. These 25 forgotten suppers from old church cookbooks tell the story of American home cooking when resourcefulness ruled the kitchen. Turkey croquettes with gravy. After Thanksgiving, nothing went to waste in church kitchens. Turkey croquettes transformed leftover meat into golden, crispy cylinders that fooled everyone into thinking they were getting something fancy. Ground turkey mixed with mashed potatoes, onions, and herbs got rolled in breadcrumbs and fried until crisp. The real magic happened with the gravy, made from the turkey drippings saved from the original feast. Church ladies would make dozens at a time, knowing that what looked like leftovers could taste like a completely new meal. These croquettes stretched precious protein far beyond its original serving, proving that waste was simply not an option in Depression-era church suppers. Beef and cabbage casserole. When beef was expensive and cabbage was cheap, church cooks created this hearty casserole that made a little meat feed a lot of people. Ground beef got stretched with layers of cabbage, rice, and whatever vegetables were on hand. The secret was cooking the cabbage until it became sweet and tender, almost melting into the dish, topped with a simple tomato sauce and baked until bubbly. This casserole could feed 50 people with just 2 pounds of meat. The beauty lay in its simplicity. Ingredients that cost pennies combined to create something that satisfied both hunger and the soul. Many church suppers featured this as their main dish because it was filling, affordable, and actually got better after sitting in the oven for hours. Mock chicken legs. The name tells the whole story. When chicken was too expensive, church cooks got creative with pork and veal. Cubes of meat got threaded onto wooden skewers, breaded, and fried until they looked remarkably like chicken drumsticks. The seasoning was key. Sage, thyme, and a touch of poultry seasoning convinced taste buds they were eating the real thing. These city chicken legs became so popular that many people preferred them to actual chicken. Church suppers would serve hundreds of these mock legs, and newcomers never suspected they weren't eating poultry. The dish represented the ingenuity of home cooks, who refused to let budget constraints limit their creativity. Even when chicken became affordable again, many churches kept making mock chicken legs because the congregation had grown to love them. Ham and noodle skillet. Ham bones never went to waste when church ladies were cooking. After boiling the bone for soup, any remaining meat got picked off and combined with egg noodles in a one-skillet wonder that fed dozens. The rendered ham fat provided all the seasoning needed, while onions, and sometimes peas, added color and nutrition. This dish could stretch a single ham bone into a meal for 30 people. The key was cooking the noodles directly in the ham-flavored broth, letting them absorb every bit of flavor. Many church suppers featured this as a side dish, but it was hearty enough to stand alone as a main course. The simplicity was its strength. Just ham, noodles, and whatever vegetables were available created something completely satisfying. Creamed chipped ham on biscuits. Before fancy brunch became a thing, church ladies were serving creamed chipped ham over fresh biscuits to hungry congregations. Dried ham got rehydrated in a rich cream sauce, seasoned with black pepper, and sometimes a touch of mustard. The saltiness of the ham balanced perfectly with the creamy sauce and fluffy biscuits underneath. This dish could feed a crowd for very little money, especially when the biscuits were made from scratch. Church kitchens would prepare gallons of this creamed ham, knowing it was filling enough to satisfy the hardest working members of the congregation. The dish worked for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, making it a versatile choice for any church gathering. Many recipes called for making the sauce extra thick so it wouldn't make the biscuit soggy. Eggplant hamburger pie. When ground beef was precious, eggplant helped stretch it into a satisfying pie that fooled everyone. Layers of sliced eggplant alternated with seasoned ground beef and tomato sauce, then got topped with mashed potatoes and baked until golden. The eggplant soaked up all the meat flavors while adding its own earthy taste to the mix. Church cooks discovered that salting the eggplant first removed any bitterness and helped it hold its shape during baking. This pie could serve 12 people with just 1 pound of ground beef. The presentation was impressive enough for special occasions, but the ingredients were humble enough for everyday suppers. Many church members never realized they were eating eggplant until they asked for the recipe and tried to make it at home. Bacon-topped tomato pie. Late summer brought an abundance of tomatoes, and church cooks turned them into this savory pie that celebrated the season's bounty. A pie crust held thick slices of tomatoes, layered with onions, herbs, and a mayonnaise-based topping that kept everything moist. Strips of bacon on top provided smoky flavor and helped the pie look as good as it tasted. The secret was salting the tomatoes and letting them drain to prevent a soggy crust. Church suppers would feature multiple tomato pies when gardens were producing more than families could eat fresh. The combination of sweet tomatoes, sharp onions, and salty bacon created a perfect balance of flavors. This pie worked equally well, served hot from the oven or at room temperature hours later. Rice ring with creamed mushrooms. Presentation mattered at church suppers, and this rice ring made simple ingredients look elegant. Cooked rice got packed into a ring mold, then turned out onto a platter and filled with creamed mushrooms. The rice absorbed flavors from chicken broth used in cooking, while the mushroom sauce provided richness and sophistication. Church ladies would garnish the ring with parsley or paprika to add color to the white-on-white presentation. This dish stretched expensive mushrooms to feed many people while looking fancy enough for special occasions. The ring could be made hours ahead and reheated, making it perfect for large gatherings. Many churches served this at holiday meals because it looked impressive, but used affordable ingredients that were available year-round. Cheesy spinach squares. Long before spinach became trendy, church cooks were hiding it in these cheesy squares that even children would eat. Chopped spinach mixed with eggs, cheese, and breadcrumbs, then baked in a large pan and cut into neat squares for serving. The cheese masked any bitter spinach flavor while providing protein and calcium. These squares could be served hot or cold, making them perfect for potluck dinners where timing was unpredictable. Church ladies learned that squeezing excess water from the spinach prevented soggy results. The dish provided vegetables in a form that satisfied meat and potato eaters, who normally avoided anything green. Many recipes called for cottage cheese as well as cheddar, stretching the expensive cheese while adding protein and creaminess. Barley and beef hot dish. Before quinoa and other trendy grains, barley was the go-to ingredient for stretching meat into a filling meal. This hot dish combined ground beef with pearl barley, vegetables, and enough broth to cook everything together in one pan. The barley absorbed the meat flavors while providing hearty texture and nutrition. Church suppers featured this dish because it could feed 50 people with just a few pounds of meat. The long cooking time meant it could simmer all day without overcooking, perfect for busy church kitchens. Vegetables like carrots, celery, and onions added color and nutrition while helping stretch the dish even further. The result was something that satisfied hunger for hours and provided the kind of stick-to-your-ribs nutrition that hard-working church members needed. Cornmeal dumplings over stewed tomatoes. When meat was scarce, cornmeal dumplings provided protein and substance to make a meal from simple stewed tomatoes. The dumplings cooked directly in the bubbling tomato mixture, absorbing flavors while adding heartiness. Cornmeal was cheaper than flour and added a slightly sweet, nutty taste that complemented the acidic tomatoes perfectly. Church cooks would season the tomatoes with onions, herbs, and sometimes a touch of sugar to balance the acidity. The dumplings puffed up light and fluffy when cooked properly, creating a satisfying contrast to the soft tomatoes. This dish represented true comfort food, simple ingredients transformed into something that warmed both body and soul. Many church members considered this peasant food, but it was often the most requested dish at potluck suppers. Peanut butter and onion sandwiches. This combination sounds strange now, but Depression-era church cooks knew that peanut butter and raw onion created a surprisingly satisfying sandwich filling. The creamy, salty peanut butter balanced the sharp bite of fresh onion, while both ingredients provided nutrition and flavor. These sandwiches appeared at church picnics and casual suppers because they were filling, required no cooking, and used ingredients most families had on hand. The protein from peanut butter helped satisfy hunger, while the onion added vitamins and a fresh crunch. Church ladies would slice the onions thin and use just enough to add flavor without overwhelming the peanut butter. Many people discovered this combination at church functions and went home to try it themselves, often becoming converts to this unusual but tasty pairing. Creamed dried beef over rice. Dried beef was a pantry staple that could be turned into an elegant-seeming dish with just milk, flour, and rice. The salty beef got rehydrated in a creamy white sauce that was then served over fluffy rice for a filling meal. Church cooks learned to taste the sauce before adding salt. Since the dried beef provided plenty of sodium on its own, this dish could feed many people with just a small amount of expensive beef, making it perfect for church suppers on tight budgets. The presentation looked sophisticated, but the ingredients were simple and affordable. Many recipes called for adding peas or mushrooms to stretch the dish further and add color. The creamy sauce and tender rice created comfort food that satisfied even the heartiest appetites. Mushroom-stuffed zucchini boats. Summer gardens produced more zucchini than families could eat fresh, so church cooks turned them into these stuffed boats that made vegetables the star of the meal. Large zucchini got hollowed out and filled with a mixture of the scooped flesh, mushrooms, onions, and breadcrumbs. The boats were then baked until tender and golden on top. This dish provided a way to use oversized zucchini that were too large and seedy for other preparations. Church suppers featured these boats when gardens were overproducing, and they became a popular way to get vegetables into reluctant eaters. The mushrooms added meaty flavor and texture, while the breadcrumb topping provided satisfying crunch. Many church ladies would make dozens of these boats, knowing they were both nutritious and filling enough to serve as a main dish. Carrot and pineapple casserole. This sweet and savory casserole combined two ingredients that were available year-round and created something that appealed to both children and adults. Sliced carrots layered with pineapple chunks and a small amount of brown sugar, then baked until the carrots were tender and the pineapple caramelized. The natural sweetness of both ingredients meant very little added sugar was needed. Church suppers featured this dish as a side that was substantial enough to satisfy vegetable requirements, while tasting almost like dessert. The bright orange and yellow colors made it visually appealing on buffet tables. Many church cooks discovered that this casserole could be made ahead and reheated without losing flavor or texture, making it perfect for large gatherings where timing was crucial. Cabbage and potato gratin. When expensive ingredients were scarce, cabbage and potatoes combined to create this satisfying gratin that felt much more luxurious than its simple ingredients suggested. Layers of sliced potatoes and cabbage got topped with a milk-based sauce and baked until golden and bubbly. The cabbage became sweet and tender during the long cooking process, while the potatoes provided substance and absorbed all the flavors. Church kitchens would make enormous pans of this gratin to feed large congregations with ingredients that cost very little. The dish improved with time, making it perfect for potluck dinners where food might sit for hours before serving. Many members considered this peasant food, but it consistently disappeared first from church supper tables. Rice and chicken liver bake. Before organ meats became unfashionable, chicken livers were an affordable protein that church cooks turned into this sophisticated-tasting bake. The livers were sautéed with onions, then combined with rice and broth for a dish that was both nutritious and economical. The key was not overcooking the livers, which could become tough and bitter. Church suppers featured this dish because it provided high-quality protein at a fraction of the cost of chicken breasts or beef. The rice absorbed the rich liver flavors, while stretching the expensive protein to feed many people. Many church members who claimed to dislike organ meats would eat this dish without complaint, proving that proper preparation could make any ingredient appealing. The presentation was elegant enough for special occasions, despite the humble ingredients. Ground bologna salad sandwiches. When lunch meat was cheaper than fresh meat, church cooks ground bologna into a salad mixture that created satisfying sandwiches for large groups. The ground bologna mixed with mayonnaise, pickles, and onions created a spread that was both familiar and economical. These sandwiches appeared at church picnics and casual suppers because they could be made in large batches and didn't require heating. The grinding process transformed the bologna into something that felt more sophisticated than simple sliced lunch meat. Church ladies would season the mixture with mustard or pickle juice to add tang and complexity. The sandwiches were filling enough to satisfy working men while being mild enough for children to enjoy. Many families adopted this recipe for home use because it stretched expensive meat into multiple meals. Sweet potato and apple skillet. Fall brought sweet potatoes and apples together in this skillet dish that served as both side dish and dessert. Sliced sweet potatoes and apples cooked together with a small amount of butter and brown sugar until both were tender and caramelized. The natural sweetness of both ingredients meant very little added sugar was needed. Church suppers featured this dish during autumn, when both ingredients were at their peak and most affordable. The combination provided vitamins and fiber while satisfying sweet cravings without being overly rich. Many church cooks would add a touch of cinnamon or nutmeg to enhance the fall flavors. The dish could be served alongside savory main courses or enjoyed on its own as a light dessert. The beautiful colors made it an attractive addition to any buffet table. Cottage cheese and noodle casserole. This protein-rich casserole combined cottage cheese with egg noodles to create a dish that was both nutritious and economical. The cottage cheese provided calcium and protein, while the noodles added substance and absorbed flavors from added seasonings. Church kitchens would make large pans of this casserole because it could feed many people with relatively inexpensive ingredients. The key was seasoning the cottage cheese well with herbs, salt, and pepper to prevent blandness. Many recipes called for adding sour cream or milk to make the mixture creamier and more appealing. The casserole could be topped with breadcrumbs or cheese for additional flavor and texture. This dish represented the kind of practical cooking that church ladies mastered, turning simple ingredients into something satisfying and nutritious. Savory bread pudding with celery and onions. Stale bread never went to waste when church cooks could turn it into this savory pudding that served as both side dish and starch. Cubed bread, soaked in milk and eggs, then mixed with sautéed celery and onions for a pudding that was more sophisticated than its humble origin suggested. The vegetables added flavor and nutrition, while the bread provided substance and absorbed all the savory flavors. Church suppers featured this dish because it used ingredients that might otherwise be thrown away while creating something that complemented any main course. The pudding could be baked in large pans and served in neat squares, making it practical for feeding crowds. Many church members were surprised to discover they were eating leftover bread, since the final dish tasted rich and purposeful. Shrimp and rice casserole with bell peppers. When shrimp was a luxury, church cooks learned to stretch it with rice and vegetables into a casserole that made a little seafood feed many people. The shrimp mixed with cooked rice, diced bell peppers and onions, then baked in a creamy sauce until hot and bubbly. The peppers added color, crunch, and vitamins while helping stretch the expensive shrimp. Church suppers featured this casserole for special occasions, when the budget allowed for something more luxurious than usual. The presentation was elegant enough for holiday meals, but the preparation was simple enough for volunteer cooks to manage. Many coastal churches had access to affordable shrimp and made this dish regularly, while inland congregations reserved it for celebrations. The combination of protein, starch, and vegetables made it a complete meal in one dish. Salmon croquettes with white sauce. Canned salmon transformed into these golden croquettes that provided elegant presentation and satisfying flavor. The salmon mixed with mashed potatoes, onions, and eggs, then formed into patties and fried until crispy outside and creamy inside. The white sauce, made from milk, flour, and butter, elevated the simple croquettes into something that felt sophisticated. Church suppers featured these croquettes because canned salmon was more affordable than fresh fish, while still providing high-quality protein. The patties could be made ahead and kept warm, making them practical for large gatherings. Many church cooks would add herbs like dill or parsley to enhance the fish flavor and add visual appeal. The croquettes were substantial enough to serve as a main course, while being mild enough for children to enjoy. Stuffed green pepper soup. This soup captured all the flavors of stuffed peppers in a form that could feed many more people with the same ingredients. Ground beef, rice, and diced bell peppers simmered in a tomato-based broth that was both hearty and economical. The soup provided the satisfaction of stuffed peppers without the time-consuming preparation of hollowing and stuffing individual peppers. Church kitchens could make enormous pots of this soup to serve large congregations during cold weather. The rice added substance while absorbing the meat and vegetable flavors. Many church cooks would add extra vegetables like onions, celery, and carrots to stretch the soup further and add nutrition. The result was comfort food that warmed both body and soul, while making expensive ingredients feed many people. The soup actually improved with time, making it perfect for events where food might need to stay warm for hours. Creamed corn and chicken bake. Canned corn and leftover chicken created this golden casserole that turned simple ingredients into something special for Sunday suppers. The corn provided sweetness and color, while chicken added protein and substance to feed hungry families. Church cooks would mix the ingredients with a cream sauce made from milk and flour, then top everything with buttered breadcrumbs for texture. The casserole could stretch a small amount of chicken to serve dozens of people when mixed with enough corn and sauce. Many recipes called for adding diced bell peppers or onions for extra flavor and nutrition. The dish baked until bubbly and golden, creating something that looked much more expensive than its humble ingredients suggested. Church ladies knew this casserole would satisfy both children and adults while staying within tight budgets that characterized most congregation meals. Tuna and potato chip casserole. Before gourmet casseroles became trendy, church cooks were combining canned tuna with crushed potato chips to create this crunchy top dish that everyone loved. The tuna, mixed with cooked egg noodles and a simple cream sauce, then got topped with crushed chips that provided both flavor and texture. The salty chips eliminated the need for additional seasoning, while creating an appealing golden crust when baked. Church suppers featured this casserole because it used pantry staples that were always available and affordable. The combination of protein from tuna and carbohydrates from noodles made it a complete meal that satisfied hungry church members. Many families discovered this recipe at church dinners and went home to recreate it for weeknight meals. The dish represented the creativity of home cooks who could turn simple ingredients into something that felt indulgent and special. Beef and rice. Stuffed tomatoes. Late summer tomatoes became edible bowls for this mixture of ground beef, rice, and seasonings that made vegetables the star of the meal. Large tomatoes got hollowed out and filled with a savory mixture that used every bit of the scooped-out flesh. The beef provided protein, while rice added substance and absorbed all the tomato flavors during baking. Church gardens often produced more tomatoes than families could use fresh, making this dish a practical way to use the abundance. The stuffed tomatoes looked elegant enough for special occasions, but used ingredients that were readily available and inexpensive. Church cooks would make dozens of these stuffed tomatoes when gardens were producing heavily. The natural sweetness of ripe tomatoes balanced perfectly with the savory beef and rice filling, creating a complete meal that satisfied both hunger and the desire for something that looked impressive on the dinner table. Macaroni and cheese with ham bits. Long before boxed macaroni and cheese existed, church cooks were making this from-scratch version that included bits of leftover ham for extra protein and flavor. The cheese sauce started with a roux of butter and flour, then slowly incorporated milk and cheese until smooth and creamy. Ham scraps from holiday meals got diced and mixed into the pasta, turning a side dish into a complete meal. Church suppers featured this dish because it could feed large crowds with relatively inexpensive ingredients while providing the comfort food that everyone craved. The key was using a combination of cheeses, often whatever was available, to create depth of flavor. Many church ladies would top the casserole with breadcrumbs mixed with melted butter for extra richness and texture. The dish represented the kind of practical cooking that made the most of every ingredient while creating something that satisfied both children and adults. Depression cake. During the Great Depression, this cake became a miracle of resourcefulness. No eggs, no butter, no milk, just flour, sugar, cocoa, baking soda, salt, water, oil, and vinegar. The chemical reaction between vinegar and baking soda created the lift that eggs usually provided. Families called it wacky cake because the method seemed crazy, mixing wet ingredients directly in the pan. The result was a moist, rich chocolate cake that cost pennies to make. Mothers would serve this at birthday parties, and children never knew they were eating poverty food. The cake proved that necessity truly is the mother of invention, transforming basic pantry staples into something that could bring joy to the darkest times. Peanut butter and bacon sandwich. The combination of creamy peanut butter and crispy bacon created a protein-rich sandwich that satisfied hunger for hours. This pairing became popular during times when meat was rationed, as peanut butter provided plant protein, while small amounts of bacon added the smoky flavor families craved. The Betty Crocker version suggested using just enough bacon to add taste without overwhelming the budget. Some families cooked the bacon until very crispy, then crumbled it into the peanut butter for even distribution. Others preferred whole strips for texture contrast. The sandwich traveled well in lunch pails, as the peanut butter prevented the bacon from making the bread soggy. Children loved the sweet-salty combination, while adults appreciated the sustained energy it provided for physical labor. Egg drop soup. Chinese-American families adapted this simple soup to stretch ingredients during hard times. Beaten eggs, slowly poured into simmering broth, created silky ribbons of protein that transformed plain water into satisfying soup. The Betty Crocker version added cornstarch for thickness and suggested green onions for color and flavor. Families discovered that leftover rice or noodles could transform this soup into a complete meal. The technique required practice. Eggs added too quickly created scrambled chunks instead of delicate strands. Children learned to pour slowly, while mothers stirred constantly, creating kitchen memories that lasted lifetimes. This soup could be ready in minutes, making it perfect for unexpected guests or when hunger struck suddenly. The simplicity belied its sophistication. A few ingredients handled skillfully created something restaurant-worthy. Oatmeal meatloaf. When meat was expensive, oats stretched the family protein to feed more mouths. This meatloaf combined ground beef with rolled oats, creating a hearty texture that held together perfectly without breadcrumbs. The oats absorbed the meat's juices, staying moist while adding subtle nuttiness. Betty Crocker's version included onions, eggs, and milk, forming a loaf that sliced cleanly for sandwiches the next day. Families discovered that oatmeal meatloaf actually tasted better than the all-meat version. The oats prevented the dense, heavy texture that plagued traditional recipes. Children who turned their noses up at morning oatmeal eagerly ate it, disguised in this dinner favorite. The recipe proved that sometimes limitations led to improvements, creating a dish that remained popular long after economic necessity passed. Slumgullion. This one-pot wonder turned whatever remained in the pantry into a satisfying meal. Ground meat, when available, mixed with potatoes, onions, and any vegetables on hand. The Betty Crocker version suggested canned tomatoes as the base, but families used everything from leftover gravy to diluted ketchup. The name came from mining camps, where cooks threw together whatever they had into one big pot. No two Slumgullion meals tasted alike. Variety was built into the recipe's DNA. Mothers appreciated its flexibility, and children looked forward to the surprise of never knowing exactly what they'd find in their bowl. The dish taught families to be creative with leftovers, transforming odds and ends into something hearty enough to fuel hard-working bodies through difficult days. Stone soup. Based on the famous folktale, this recipe started with water and a clean stone, then built flavor through community contributions. The Betty Crocker version provided a practical framework. Start with broth or bouillon, add root vegetables, and finish with whatever protein was available. Families used this recipe during particularly lean times, sending children to neighbors with small offerings in exchange for soup contributions. One family might contribute an onion, another some leftover beans, a third perhaps a ham bone for flavoring. The stone served as a conversation starter and a symbol of shared responsibility. By evening, a pot that started with nothing had become a hearty meal for everyone involved. The recipe taught children about community cooperation while ensuring no one went hungry. Molasses cookies. When sugar was rationed or too expensive, molasses provided sweetness and distinctive flavor for cookie making. These soft, chewy treats combined molasses with flour, spices, and just enough fat to hold them together. The Betty Crocker recipe included ginger, cinnamon, and cloves, creating warming spices that made the house smell like Christmas, even in July. Children helped roll the dough into balls and press them with fork tines, creating the characteristic crosshatch pattern. The cookies stayed soft for days, making them perfect for lunchboxes and after-school snacks. Mothers appreciated their keeping quality and the way they satisfied sweet cravings without breaking the budget. The dark, rich flavor made them seem more sophisticated than simple sugar cookies, proving that sometimes limitations led to superior results. Fried potato skins. Before loaded potato skins became restaurant appetizers, frugal cooks fried the peels removed from dinner potatoes. These crispy treats provided snacks for children, while mothers prepared the main meal. The Betty Crocker method involved saving clean peels throughout the day, then frying them in hot fat until golden and crispy. Salt, while hot, made them irresistible. Families discovered that potato skins contained valuable nutrients, making this waste food actually nutritious. Children begged for these crispy treats, never realizing they were eating scraps. Some cooks saved bacon fat specifically for frying potato skins, adding flavor while using up another kitchen byproduct. The recipe taught families to look beyond conventional thinking about what constituted food, finding value in parts others might discard. Tomato sandwich. Summer's abundance of tomatoes created the perfect opportunity for simple, satisfying sandwiches. Thick slices of ripe tomatoes, layered between mayonnaise-spread bread with salt and pepper, became a seasonal celebration. The Betty Crocker version emphasized choosing fully ripe tomatoes and salting them briefly to draw out excess moisture. Families grew their own tomatoes when possible, making these sandwiches practically free during harvest season. The key: lay in good bread that could stand up to the tomatoes' juice without becoming soggy. Some cooks added lettuce or bacon when available, but purists insisted that perfect tomatoes needed no embellishment. These sandwiches captured the essence of summer in every bite, providing fresh nutrition when budgets couldn't stretch to more expensive proteins. Fried green tomato sandwich. End-of-season green tomatoes found new life when sliced, breaded, and fried until golden. These crispy, tangy slices created unique sandwiches that used up garden produce that wouldn't ripen before frost. The Betty Crocker method involved dipping tomato slices in buttermilk, then cornmeal, before frying in hot fat. The contrast between the crispy exterior and firm, tart interior created interesting textures and flavors. Families served these hot from the skillet, often with mayonnaise or mustard, to complement the tomatoes' tanginess. The recipe prevented waste while creating something special from what others might discard. Some cooks added spices to the cornmeal coating for extra flavor. These sandwiches proved that creativity in the kitchen could transform potential waste into memorable meals. Dandelion salad. Those yellow flowers dotting your yard weren't weeds to Depression-era families. They were free groceries growing right outside the door. Dandelion salad became a staple when store-bought vegetables were luxuries most couldn't afford. Mothers would send children out with baskets to gather the tender young leaves before the flowers bloomed, knowing that older leaves would be too bitter to stomach. The preparation was simple but strategic. Fresh dandelion greens were washed thoroughly and mixed with whatever was available. A splash of vinegar, a pinch of salt, maybe some wild onions if you were lucky. Some families added hard-boiled eggs when the chickens were laying well, turning this humble green into a complete meal. The slightly bitter taste reminded everyone that survival sometimes required swallowing your pride, along with whatever nature provided. Hot water cornbread. When buttermilk, eggs, and oil were luxuries, hot water cornbread proved that you could still make fresh bread with just cornmeal, salt, and boiling water. This simple flatbread could be cooked on a griddle or in a skillet, providing fresh, warm bread when store-bought options were impossible to afford. The process was quick and required no special equipment. Cornmeal would be mixed with salt, then boiling water would be stirred in until the mixture formed a thick batter. The batter would be shaped into patties and cooked on a hot, greased surface until golden brown on both sides. The result was a crispy exterior with a soft, corn-flavored interior. Hot water cornbread represented self-sufficiency and the ability to create comfort food from the most basic ingredients. The warm bread could make any meal feel more complete, and the simple preparation meant that even children could help make it. Families took pride in their ability to create fresh bread when everything else seemed scarce. Bacon and onion sandwich. When meat became precious, every strip of bacon was treated like gold. The bacon and onion sandwich stretched a single slice of bacon into a satisfying meal through clever preparation and generous helpings of whatever was free or cheap. One strip would be fried slowly, rendering every drop of fat, then removed while the onions cooked in the precious grease. The onions, often the only vegetables families could consistently afford, would caramelize in the bacon fat, absorbing all those rich flavors while adding their own sweetness. Meanwhile, the bacon would be chopped into tiny pieces and distributed evenly across thick slices of homemade bread. Each bite delivered the promise of meat, while the onions provided the substance. This sandwich represented the art of making less seem like more. Families developed rituals around it: the careful ceremony of cooking the bacon, the patient waiting as onions transformed from sharp to sweet, the precise distribution of ingredients to ensure everyone got their fair share. It was a lesson in making the most of what you had, while never forgetting the value of what you were using. Baked beans. The humble bean became a cornerstone of Depression-era survival, and baked beans represented the perfect marriage of economy and nutrition. Dried beans were cheap, stored well, and provided protein when meat was scarce. A pot of baked beans could feed a family for days, and the recipe could be adjusted based on what else was available. The basic formula was simple: beans, water, and time. But families found ways to enhance the flavor with whatever they had. A spoonful of molasses if sugar was available, some bacon grease if there'd been bacon recently, or just salt and pepper if nothing else could be spared. The long, slow cooking process filled the house with aromas that made everyone forget how little they actually had to eat. Baked beans were also social food. Neighbors would share ingredients. One family might contribute the beans, another some molasses, and a third the fuel for cooking. Large pots would simmer in shared ovens, creating community bonds along with dinner. Children would carry bowls between houses, trading portions, and ensuring everyone had something warm to eat, even when individual families couldn't make a complete meal on their own. Mulligan stew. Born in hobo camps but adopted by struggling families everywhere, Mulligan stew represented the ultimate in cooperative cooking. The concept was simple. Everyone contributed whatever they could find, and together, it became a meal that could feed more people than any individual contribution could have managed alone. Railroad workers and traveling men perfected the art of Mulligan stew, but families adapted it for their own kitchens during the worst years of the Depression. One family might contribute potatoes, another some questionable meat, a third whatever vegetables they could spare. The stew would simmer all day, with people adding ingredients as they became available, creating something that was always changing but always filling. The beauty of Mulligan stew was that it couldn't fail. Whatever went in became part of the flavor profile. Overripe vegetables added sweetness, tough meat became tender with long cooking, and bones contributed richness to the broth. It was democracy in a pot, where every ingredient had value, and every contributor had a stake in the final result. Rabbit stew. When families couldn't afford store-bought meat, many turned to rabbits, animals that reproduce quickly, ate scraps, and provided protein for the pot. Rabbit stew became common, not just because rabbits were available, but because the stew could be stretched with vegetables and made to last for several meals. Preparing rabbit stew required skills that many urban families had to learn quickly. The rabbits had to be cleaned and butchered, a process that was difficult but necessary for survival. The meat was lean and flavorful, but it needed long, slow cooking to become tender. Root vegetables like carrots, potatoes, and onions were added to make the meal more substantial and to absorb the rich flavors of the broth. For many families, rabbit stew represented a connection to older ways of living, when people were more directly involved in producing their own food. Children who had never seen where their food came from suddenly learned about the realities of turning animals into meals. It was often their first lesson in understanding that survival sometimes required doing things that were uncomfortable but necessary. Cornmeal pudding. Cornmeal was cheap, filling, and versatile, making it a staple ingredient for families trying to stretch their food budgets. Cornmeal pudding could serve as breakfast, dinner, or dessert depending on how it was prepared and what was added to it. The basic recipe was simple enough that even children could help prepare it. Sweet versions of cornmeal pudding used molasses or sugar to create something that felt like dessert, while savory versions incorporated vegetables or small amounts of meat to create a substantial main dish. The pudding could be eaten warm from the pot or allowed to cool and set, then sliced and fried for a different texture and flavor. Making cornmeal pudding required careful attention to prevent lumps and burning, but the process was forgiving enough that even inexperienced cooks could succeed. The slow stirring required to make smooth pudding became a meditative activity, a time for family members to talk about their day or share plans for making their situation better. Bread pudding. Stale bread was never thrown away during the Depression. It was too valuable to waste. Bread pudding transformed hard, dry bread into something soft, sweet, and satisfying. Every household had their own version, depending on what other ingredients were available, but the basic principle remained the same. Nothing edible should ever be wasted. The process started with breaking up stale bread and soaking it in whatever liquid could be spared. Milk was ideal, but water with a bit of butter or even coffee could work in desperate times. Eggs would be beaten in if they were available, along with any sweetener that could be found. Raisins, nuts, or pieces of fruit would be added if the family had been particularly fortunate. Bread pudding represented the transformation of something that seemed useless into something desirable. Children learned to save bread crusts and ends, knowing they would eventually become part of something special. The warm, custardy texture and sweet flavor made it feel like a reward for being careful with resources.